How are you? And thanks for being here. My name is John Marinacci. I am the president of St. Joseph's Prep. I'm in my second year here, and I'm excited to have some prep alums and a current prep student here to talk about their experience in this wonderful place. So I'd ask that you give us a little context. Our idea for tonight is to have an opportunity to talk about your experiences at the prep. What's universal, what's changed, what's different, what remains constant, and how it's kind of shaped you in your life. But why don't we start off with introducing ourselves. Let's go ahead down there.
I'm Michael Fanning, class of '94. I'm a firefighter in the city, Rescue 1, Philadelphia, and I'm also a member of Pennsylvania Task Force 1 as a rescue specialist.
I'm Nevin McGinley. I'm an emergency medicine physician. Work at Reading Hospital in Reading, Pennsylvania, and class of '95.
Michael Nutter, board member, again, at the prep, second tour duty, professor of practice at Columbia University, and former mayor of the city of Philadelphia, class of '75.
I'm Jake Braithwaite. I am currently a Jesuit in formation, doing my regency at Brooklyn Jesuit Prep, teaching 7th and 8th grade math, and I am class of '07 from the prep.
Hi all, I'm Antoine Robinson. I'm a junior, class of '24. Some of the things I do here at the prep, because I don't have a job, sorry. I do cape and sword, forensics, and many other things. There's a huge list. I don't want to get into it. It's really, really long.
So, as you know better than anybody, the prep is a place that attracts incredibly talented young men from throughout the Delaware Valley. The goal is to try to help these young men in their formation to become the best versions of themselves, to go out and make the world a better place. But it starts with attracting the young men here. Tell me a little bit about your coming to the prep. What's your story? How'd you find out about the prep? What led you to being here? Some people, it's generations. Some people, they're the first in their family. What's your story?
Both of my brothers, I was lucky, both my brothers came to the prep before I did. I'm the youngest of three. We came from a very working class background. We lived in Fishtown before it was the booming Fishtown that it's become. It was just a blue collar neighborhood, and my parents just wanted us to have a different perspective than the insular world that we were living in at the time. They just wanted to have a larger, girth of what our capabilities were at the time, and that's what brought us here.
Sister Maureen James, at the Transfiguration of Our Lord School, where I went to grade school, was the first person to mention the prep to me. I'd never heard of the prep, didn't know anything about it. I was thinking I was going to go to military school, which would have been really fascinating. But she steered me in the right direction. And then my grandmother, who was very active at St. Peter Claver Parish, also talked about the prep. So came, did pre-prep tests, got in. That was it.
My journey to the prep was a little more non-traditional. I was actually a transfer student. I came in as a junior. I was attracted to the prep. I went to public high school. I grew up in Havertown. I was at a co-ed public school at Haverford High. And I had a lot of friends that went to the prep that I grew up with, and they always talked about how great of a place it was. And for me, it was just watching them on weekends and how close their friendships were, and seeing how much they loved school. That was something that was kind of new to me. And I visited here as a sophomore and loved it, and transferred in as a junior and kind of never looked back. It was probably the best decision I've ever made in my life, except being married and having kids.
Smart man.
Thank you.
You may have heard of my uncle, Tony Braithwaite. So I was coming to the prep from when I was in second grade, seeing the shows. I was actually in a show here when I was in 5th grade, just 11 years old on the prep stage. And so I always knew from that first show that I saw that I was going to be going here. And I really didn't have a choice. He's my godfather, so there's really only one choice for me.
Any school you wanted, as long as it was the prep.
Correct.
Got it, okay.
I went to Waldron Mercy Academy, and they have a lot of connections to the prep. So there was always a part of me that knew I was going to come here, whether I liked it or not. But when I did things like Prep U and just visited the school, I knew that I did want to come here. Wasn't just like I have to go here. I really like this place. it was just the place for me. And this wasn't just me. My mom, she would always tell my dad, I just have a feeling about this place. I know it's the right one for my son. So everything, it came together for me through Waldron and through my mom and my dad, of course, who labors every day to send me here.
So a hallmark of the prep experience, obviously, is the classroom experience. Tell me a little bit about learning in the classroom. Tell me about where some of the greatest challenges that you faced were, whether they be specific disciplines or perhaps experiences that you had. And if you could recall, maybe who are some of those teachers that helped you navigate it in their own unique styles?
Mine was Ryan Maher, SJ at the time, which at the time he was just an SJ, so it was, no expectations on him or anything. Like now, no one would be shocked to say that he was an inspiring teacher. He just had a different sort of holistic approach that he knew how to challenge you, but in an endearing way, and he just kind of found a way to bring out the best of you and force you into something that you didn't even realize you were comfortable in yourself, right? Like, I know I was strong in math and engineering, and he was teaching us English. And when I go to Temple, I wind up an English literature major because it was just a comfort of, and not to mention he could teach you how to write too. He had a pretty high standard of teaching you what to do. But yeah, so it was like just those neat, different challenges that he expected more of you, and you eventually over a semester or 2 semesters felt it yourself and jumped in. He knew how to ignite.
I think transferring in, I had trepidation about a few different things. I'd never been in an all-boys environment before. I was nervous about that. That ended up probably being one of the best things because you're not worried about trying to show off or impress anybody, and I felt like I could be myself a lot more. And I knew the reputation the prep had for education, and the academic rigor that I was expecting was surpassed. I mean, it's a tough place. You really got to work hard, and it forced me to, and I appreciated that. It helped me prepare for college. I know when I went to Fordham, I did not feel like Fordham was beyond my reach at all academically, and I did really well there. And I watched a lot of people transition to college and struggle. And the teachers were so welcoming when I came here. Whether it was Mr. Raffa, Father Taggart, Father Keller, it was just awesome. It was an awesome place to come and feel welcomed and made part of the community immediately. Like that really had an impact on me.
I'll even say that I think the school encourages you to go harder and do more things, because let me tell you what, I was not the smartest kid as a freshman. Am I the smartest kid now? No. But I take classes I would have never thought I would take freshman year. I really never thought I'd be taking APs or honors classes. But through my two previous years here, I've come into wanting to learn more. I want to eat knowledge, sure, I'll go with that. And I keep going higher than I would have ever expected, and I still want to go higher than I already am. And I think the school really breeds that type of culture within the students. At the very least, I feel it does. So yeah.
I'm a firefighter who's taking a data analytics master's right now. I mean, those things just don't go, but it's like you said, it's that penchant for learning,
Yeah, I remember, and especially in the line of work I'm in now, in Ken Kanya's sophomore religion class. I mean, I don't know where the curriculum came from, but it challenged me. We were reading Karl Rahner, who I would later read as a Jesuit in a college course, but we were reading Karl Rahner at 16 years old, which was in some ways crazy. And the thing I remember most is before we went home for Christmas, he gave us an article and said, this is your assignment over Christmas break. And it was an article systematically debunking everything that happens in the nativity stories. That didn't historically happen, that didn't historically happen, that didn't historically happen. And I remember fighting with it the whole Christmas break. Why did he give us this? This is a Catholic school, what is he thinking? But as I spent time with it and really prayed with it, I saw the way that he was inviting us. He was saying, you're not kids anymore. You're adults, and so you need to have adult relationships with the faith. You can't be these little kids that still think a Christmas pageant is the center of what this faith is. That was good when you were in grade school, but you guys are men now, and so you need to learn how to relate to Christ in a way that's mature. And I think without that foundation, especially from him, I wouldn't be where I am right now.
We often wonder what Ken Kenya was thinking. But we'll leave that at that. Yeah, the rigor, the teachers, I was not, I never thought really that much about, other than current events, government. I ended up loving that, and American history. That's certainly influenced from Jerry Taylor. But Mr. Scanlon and Latin, Father Garber, and chemistry. I mean, it's a laundry list of folks. But the focus, the intentionality, the pushing. I know you can do more. This is it. It really kind of gets inside you that you start pushing yourself. And when you have doubts, you have people to talk to, and it makes all the difference in the world.
Well, Jake, you mentioned about being challenged to kind of grow beyond where you were, right? And I think this is one of these balances I talk about all the time as a teacher. I teach an English class with freshmen right now, and obviously as an administrator at the school, and somebody who's been in schools for a long time, I always think of balancing the care for the kid that you have in front of you, but helping him grow into the young man that he's becoming, right? And finding that balance. And that's that cura personalis that we talk about in Jesuit education, right? Care for the individual, getting them what they need, maybe not what they want at the moment, but always what they need is the priority of the person in the classroom, really the mission of the school. What other ways did you kind of find out what you needed? How did you grow when you were here? What were you involved in, whether it be teams or clubs or just other discoveries that you made here? And maybe who were some of the companions along that journey, whether it be a coach or a classmate or an upperclassman that was looking out for you? How'd you discover yourself when you were here?
On sports fields for me. I mean, I think I tried all of them. Soccer was my primary, but I rode, wrestled, track, football. I kicked for the football team. I tried a little bit of everything, but soccer was my passion. It was what I continued. I wound up coaching here for over 20 seasons after I left Temple. And it was just definitely, it's still, everything I learned here and on the soccer field carries over to what I do now, right? Our crew is run like a team. We're right back into a locker room after jobs and before jobs, and our preparation, the training, all that kind of stuff is directly reflective of the sports teams that I was on here.
I can still hear Gamp's voice all these years later. Gamp Pellegrini, our football coach, was more than a coach. And what I would always say about him is that I hated him every day and I loved him every night. It was just torturous. But he drove us, he gave us confidence, and it was an incredible experience. One of the toughest conversations up until that point, at least in my life, was I was planning to I did go to Penn Pre-Med, but that was the path, and I took this, got involved in this junior year internship program, working in a hospital in a laboratory, and it wasn't going to allow me to play football the fall of my junior year. And Gamp had a insurance company, in addition, of course, to being a prep coach, and so I had to go out to his office and tell him that I was not going to play my junior year. I played freshman year, sophomore year. I actually gotten to be a bit of a starter. Actually took somebody's job sophomore year. So there were some expectations, and I could not have been more nervous to have to sit in his office, and he was busy, and I'm waiting, and I'm like, when is this going to be over? And he just could not have been more kind. In listening, and well, son, if that's what you need to do, but you're always welcome back. And I came back my senior year. Had to fight for my job, but I came back my senior year. But it was an incredible experience. It really, really was. But I was so nervous. Yeah, I didn't want to disappoint him.
That's it, right?
Yeah. I, of course, spent a lot of time in the theater with my uncle, and what for me had happened was, growing up, theater was very easy to me. It's kind of the family business, and I'd been in a lot of shows, and so I thought that it was something I could sort of roll into. And I learned pretty quickly when Tony cut me from my first show that even my last name couldn't get me in. And so I had to work for what I wanted. And just because I loved something and just because other people had said I was good at it, didn't mean that I was automatically going to get everything I had gotten before. And so and again, it was extra complicated because we have these blood ties. He's my godfather. But he always challenged me. He said, I expect more from you. I expect you to go further still. I expect you to look for the magis in what we do. And he held all of us, and I assume he still does, to those standards. There was never, everybody got held to that. Everybody got held to the same standard. And it was hard not to get the nepotism, but I learned a lot from that.
Probably a good lesson in and of itself. Right?
Absolutely.
How was Thanksgiving that year?
I think, because I'm also in theater, so I'm not an actor, but I can relate to the working as hard as possible under Mr. Braithwaite. But with all the different clubs I do, each and every one of the moderators always wants the best of the people in their club, so the people in the club can come together and make something beautiful, whether it be a yearbook, a play, a newspaper. And when the moderators do this, something beautiful comes from it. It brings the school together as one. It furthers like the students as people, brings out the cura personalis and many other things that this school stands for. And it's really a shame when kids here don't do many clubs and activities and they miss out on the connection they get with their fellow students. So,
thank you. So, once somebody goes to the prep, it's part of their identity for life, and it comes up often. How do you feel when you say, "I graduated, I go to," in your case, or "I went to the prep," and how do other people respond?
It's been one of the best things in my life. If you ask my wife, she'll tell you that on our first date 19 years ago, I told her that our sons were going to go to the prep. I didn't specifically say it like that, but that's the story she tells. We were going out. It was the Friday after Thanksgiving of 2004, and we're meeting up with a bunch of prep guys down in the city, and she was like, "You keep saying the prep, what is this place?" And I started explaining a little bit to her, and I said, the thing about this school is it's a brotherhood, and you're connected to these guys for life. You still talk to them 20, 30 years later. And I just said kind of nonchalantly, I was like, I'll put it this way, it's the type of place I know when I have sons, I'm going to want them to go to the prep. And it had an impact on her, and now I have 2 sons, and we're hopefully going to the prep in a couple of years.
Well, I don't have a wife to tell a story about. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It happens to the best of us. Yeah, who knows? Maybe I'll be in your seat one day. Not right now though. But it's weird how many people I tell I go to the prep, and they're like, I did too. Like maybe it was like a month or 2 ago. But there was this guy who came to my house to deliver some letter to my dad or something. It was really weird. And he was like, "Oh, where do you go?" I was like, "I go to the prep." He's like, "What? I went there too in like the 70s." And I'm like, this random guy, not to be mean, but he was a random guy who showed up at my house, just happens to go to the prep. It's like there's so many prep guys just out there. And it's weird, but it's cool to see just like how many of them you'll end up meeting in your lifetime. And we talked for a little bit and sharing stories, like what we did when we were there, how it's different from when it was back then. And it's really cool just to share that experience with other people. And when I get to tell, other teenagers that I go to the prep, it's a source of pride because I know I go to a great school and I'm happy that I can tell other people that's where I go, and I take pride in that too. Yeah.
For me, the prep obviously has had a lot of vocations to the Society of Jesus. And it's funny because people will say, "Oh, do you know this guy?" And I say, "Oh yeah, we were in high school together." And, "Oh, do you know this guy?" I say, "Oh, we actually led Kairos together." "Oh, we were in a show together." And it's all these Jesuits who went to St. Joe's Prep, and they hold it and we're a really diverse group of guys. Mm-hmm. But people in the society know, "Oh, he's a St. Joe's Prep guy. He's a St. Joe's Prep guy. Why? How did you all get here?" But there's something in the water, they say, that makes people hear the call. So So I also feel that source of pride, especially among the Jesuits.
For me, there's an immediate bond when you meet somebody that shares it. But then the circles that I am in, it also comes with a little bit of expectation, right? They kind of give you a little bit of an up down when you're like, oh yeah, you're from the prep, are you? So there's a little bit of that challenge that goes back to what the teachers instilled in you to meet that challenge, and you feel it, right? And it's, hopefully you have a good day. Because there's a little bit of an eye on you, right? There's
That's
an
a great
expectation.
question, right?
There is from outsiders.
When has being a prep grad or a prep student been a challenge for you, actually? And some of it comes with that responsibility and expectation, I would imagine. Right?
On my career, absolutely.
Yeah.
The going is, oh, you went to the prep and you're a firefighter. I'm like, yeah, I'm a firefighter because I went to the prep. If you want to inquire, feel free. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to pick my brain, go for it. It's not the opposite, the assumed attachment to white collar, have to, succeed in the business world or something like that. I'm like, funny thing about the prep is it's not that at all. And it's like a best kept secret amongst us, that we see people in service oriented fields and understand it exactly,
How about a time being a prep guy opened a door for you, created an opportunity, gave you perhaps a leg up either in the professional way or in a personal relationship or something along those lines?
When I was interviewing for my first job out of residency, I was sitting there and the chairman of the emergency department at Reading picked up my CV, looked at it, and just started shaking his head. He goes, oh, no. And he puts his secretary on speakerphone. He goes, Donna, nobody told me this McGinley guy was a prep grad. And I just looked at him and I said, oh, don't even tell me you went to LaSalle. I was like, this is over. I was like, I don't even want to work here anymore. But we hit it off right away. There was that mutual respect. Like, even though he was a LaSalle grad, I can hardly say it, he knew what it meant to go to the prep, and he knew what type of person he was getting because I went to the prep. And I knew when I left that interview that I had a job. He told me that. And we still bust each other's chops to this day about Prep LaSalle, but I still have a job.
Excellent.
I mean, I know in different parts of the city, both when I ran for city council and when I ran for mayor, I know that the prep name brought votes and support my way. I mean, people said it just very directly. You went to the prep, right? Okay, I'm for you. I know somebody that went. I got a relative that went. I know the kid down the street who went. It is such a validator and a calling card. It's like, I already know something about you from a value standpoint, behavior standpoint, an education standpoint. And whatever I might have had to say after that was really secondary to the opinion that already had been formed by hello. So it's definitely had an impact.
Comes with an obligation, though, right? You got to carry the standard, so to speak. And expectation, certainly. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have met a lot of prep guys before I even got here throughout my education and my professional career in Jesuit education, and went to Jesuit high schools, went to Jesuit college, and certainly knew about the prep. But when I stepped into this role, everybody said, well, you're going someplace now that really carries with it that standard, right? And kind of all the great Jesuit institutions that I've been associated with, as you were saying, the prep is a leader in a lot of the ways of a Jesuit school.
Right.
And so talking about that, right, and the big pieces is formation. The Jesuits talk often about consolation and desolation, right? When we're moving towards or from God at different moments. Has your experience at the prep helped you in any way find a different path towards your faith, towards God? How has being associated with the prep perhaps helped you in times of struggle?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the touchstone moments from my time at the prep that I go back to a lot, and actually when I was applying to be a Jesuit, I included as part of my spiritual autobiography that we have to write, is in my summer going into my senior year, I did a service trip down to Ivanhoe, Virginia, which I think still happens. And Ivanhoe, Virginia is a very poor rural town, And we had little odd jobs to do throughout the town. So they knew that people were coming, so they'd find little things, weed somebody's garden, do other things. And they said, there's a guy that lives up the hill, Dennis, who has terminal cancer and he's going to die. He's kind of given up on life. And they said he hasn't done dishes in a long time. I said, well, how bad can it be? And we went in, and it was as bad as it could be. And Andrew Whalen, who was our chaperone on the trip, said, he said, Jake, do you want to do the dishes? I said, how long do you think it's going to take? Well, 8 hours later, I was covered in just gross washing the dishes, and it had been there so long, you really had to scrub. It was one of the moments that I felt closest to God that I've had in my entire life. Being able to give this man a gift that was really not even that much. It was just doing the dishes. But knowing that he finally had a clean house, his life had totally fallen apart. He was at the end of his rope. But I could give him this very small token, and then I sort of disappeared. That's a lot of what being a Jesuit is like. You give people these little gifts that maybe are just a little bit of work on your end, but can sort of change the trajectory of their weeks, months, lives. And I go back to Dennis, and I pray with how that's really how God calls us to work in the world. So we have all the academics that are excellent. We have the activities that are championship winning and beyond compare. But for me, the moment that really defines what made me who I am is doing those dishes.
Yeah, I think for me, two things that stood out about my career at the prep. One was a service trip to Weirton, West Virginia. It was the first time I did a service trip, and I loved it. And it's something that I've tried to continue. I, did tutoring and worked at a soup kitchen in college. I actually worked at the prep. I did the alumni service corps for a year, and that year we took a trip to Dominican Republic. I've been on a couple medical mission trips to Peru and Guatemala, and that all started here at the prep, and realizing no matter how much I put into and give for these service trips, it almost feels selfish. I do get a lot more out of it. And then the other thing that really stood out to me about the prep in a spiritual way was Kairos. Kairos taught me that I'm not alone. There's a lot of people who I might think one thing because I see what's on the outside, and I have no idea what's going on in their life. And it taught me that we all have our own struggles, and what we see on that outer shell is not always what's going on inside. And that helps me in my job today. People come to the emergency department because they have no place else to go. They're scared and they're worried about a health problem. And sometimes I might see it as, I'm surprised this person came here for, something so small, but to them it may be the biggest thing in the world. And being able to step back and realize that it's about them and helping them with that. Again, that came from something at the prep, realizing that, what people put forward isn't always what's out there. And it really helped me connect with people.
It's the continuation of the ethos of service and giving back. Again, I didn't know I was going to end up in this profession, but I was on a scholarship. I got a Geno scholarship, and a part of your responsibility was community service. I think we were doing community service before community service was community service. It's just what we did, and so I tutored and over at Jesuit. I also did some work at Transfiguration, where I went to grade school. But in the continuation of a public service career, I never got greater joy as a councilperson or as mayor than to be able to read to kids, go to a classroom. And so that, again, that passion for learning, that love of learning, but also the continuation of still giving and giving back. And that's really been, for me, kind of centered in the things that I learned here. And it was, I never felt that the, service related to the scholarship was, any kind of, burden or like, oh man, why do I have to do this? I mean, I'm being given something to be able to be at this place. Of course you have to, and good, my parents tried to raise me right in that regard as well, but it just stayed with me for decades. I told my folks one time I wanted to visit every public school in the course of a calendar year or academic year. So of course, good staff people, they said, okay, we'll look into that. And then they came back, of course, and said, you can't do that because you wouldn't be able to do anything else, but we'll put more schools on your calendar, make you happy. Yeah.
So before we get off of that last topic, just because I was prepped for it, that obviously I chose a life of grand acts of kindness, but Kairos for me here as well just showed me the impacts of small acts of kindness every day, little things that you don't care, just asking somebody how they're doing, how they're feeling, connecting with people in a classroom if it's the 2 minutes that you have before the teacher locks you up, right? It's those moments sometimes that make a major impact in people's lives. And from Kairos on, I don't think I ever stopped doing it because you just recognize and realize it. Like it provides an emotion. I don't want to share too much of Kairos, right? We all know that, but it just provides an emotionally raw impact and an insight into how the effect has been on other people. So you take little elements of it and carry it with you forever. For me,
couldn't imagine a better way to encapsulate some of the core values of Jesuit education, right? Because I mean, you're talking about caring for individuals with what they need, right? Cura personalis, the heart of it, right? Men for others. I mean, let's just go down the list here. I mean, we have a firefighter, a doctor, a public servant in the form of mayor and city council, a priest in formation, and a student who's working his way towards any one of these ambitious goals. So you've mentioned service several times. I mean, but you've all dedicated yourselves to a life of service. And just thinking about that for a second, I mean, transferable skills, right? At the end of the day, people say, you learn math to become an accountant. You learn English to become an editor or a writer. What are the transferable skills that take you to become somebody who gives their lives to service in so many different ways? Where did that happen? I mean, here it happened, obviously, but like in what moments, in what relationships, in what ways?
There's so many avenues to take with that, right? I mean, before every soccer game, the prep soccer team says the nation prayer for generosity. I said, if you tell my crew, if you say that prayer to my crew, whether it be the Pennsylvania Task Force or Rescue One, they would swear that one of us wrote it for us. I mean, every pillar it checks checks the box of every pillar of that prayer, right? It's be the best you can be, not for monetary value or anything like that, just for fellow man. And it just, I know it started here at the prep, but I carry it with me every day.
I mean, once again, I don't have a job. I'm not in the career of public service yet. But where I can see it in the 3 years I've been here is just every class is built, whether it be like math or science, they're built to instill you with values in their own way that carry on service in people. And almost everything in the school, not even just classes, it's, whether it be subtly, adds these skills to you no matter what. And that's what the school is built on. No matter where you are, whether you're reading a book in the new Halley Learning Commons or in the theater, you will find someone, something, anywhere, you will find something that will give you those skills.
Nevin, you said you were an alumni service corps. That's a program here that's several decades old now, right? I mean, that has a long tradition here. Not the typical choice coming out of college to say, you know what, I'm going to go give a year back and take a vow of poverty essentially for a year. What made you go that route?
I don't know, maybe I felt like I missed out because I only had 2 years here, but I think what it really was, the Alumni Service Corps started my senior year. It was Mike Friedman, Jason Zizichny, and I'm going to blank on the other two, so I apologize. But those two especially had a big impact on me, and I had other friends the year ahead of me that were in the Alumni Service Corps. And it was that I knew I wanted to give back. I loved the prep. It had done so much for me. It got me to college. got me a scholarship to college, and I wasn't a stellar student here. You know, I have a great career now, but that came from working hard, which I was taught how to do at the prep. You know, I was pretty much a B student my career here. I remember, in fact, meeting with Sister Immaculata de Blasi, who was my college counselor, and she asked what I wanted to do, and I told her pre-med I wanted to be a doctor my whole life, and she laughed at me. She's like, not with your grades. And she's like, I don't know how you think you're going to do that. You know, where do you want to go to school? And I told her that, you know, because of football, my choices were Georgetown, Johns Hopkins, Yale, and Fordham. And I don't know how happy she was about that, but she challenged me, and I ended up getting first honors the next quarter because she challenged me on that. And, you know, that, the prep just had such an impact on me, I wanted to give back. And, you know, that year here in the Alumni Service Corps was phenomenal. You know, I taught 2 sections of U.S. history. I was kind of thrown into that. I thought I was going to come and teach math. And the week I came to pick my books up, they're like, we don't have a need for math. How do you feel about history? And I ended up teaching it, and I think my students did okay. But the experience was phenomenal. And I ended up getting hired to be the assistant dean of students, which my buddies and I to this day from the prep still joke that it was like a hiring criminals to catch criminals. But yeah.
Thanks for that. The word brotherhood has come up several times. Tell me about that. I mean, it's a word, listen, I went to Jesuit high school. I've been in all-male education for a long time. I got to be honest, the word brotherhood is used in every boys' male education school. So what's different about prep brotherhood?
I think there's something about the shared experience here. And I think you gave the example of the gentleman delivering a letter. I've been in so many different places, in an airport, in a restaurant, outside of Philadelphia, and someone may recognize me in their class of 60, or like last week when I wore my prep hat for one day and 5 different people came up and identified themselves in these classes that, you know, make me feel like I'm ancient because they just came out like 3 years ago. There is something about the shared experience of walking through those doors and coming to 17th and Girard that makes that bond very tight. It could be decades apart from a class graduation standpoint, but immediately close because of this place. And so I don't know about other schools, but you know, as I often identify myself as being from the class of 75, the best class ever came out of the prep.
Agreed?
Yeah,
or
but I mean, you know, we're on a 75-person email chain of regular contact. We have at least 1 or 2 get-togethers a year. People check on each other. We've, sadly lost a couple folks, which is a, kind of a reminder of where we all are in the journey. But that something happens with someone, and there's like an immediate response about reaching out or being in touch, or hopefully something joyful. Somebody's having a grandchild or something like that.
Can I put you on the spot for a second, a little bit about your story?
Sure.
Tell me a little bit about your prep brotherhood in your journey to become mayor of Philadelphia.
Oh my goodness. They were just over the top insane in a good way. Numerous fundraisers, reaching out to people, tons of parties. The Fishers, Lou Fisher, had basically created the Geno Scholarship when he was, involved in that business. And they were just reaching out to people all across the country about that one of our guys is running for mayor. It was, the campaign team would talk about, the prep crew, right? And they would have to almost kind of prepare themselves to get ready to deal with the prep crew because they were so over the top enthusiastic. Like, oh, okay, just, calm down a little bit. We're going to get this thing and we'll get the date. And it was an incredible feeling. It really, really was.
You touched on something there, kind of. You each have throughout this is an idea of not just doing it, but doing it to a greater level. It's that idea that Jesuit used the term imagis, but imagis doesn't necessarily mean more in terms of quantity, right? It means more or greater, it's a Latin term, in depth, in vibrancy, in vitality. In areas where it's not about necessarily doing more in terms of quantity, more push-ups or more miles or more another hour of homework, but developing depth. How's what you did here? What experience did you have here that helped you be able to go deeper, not just for yourself, but also for others, and not just for results, but for the reasons that for care, for formation, either for yourself or somebody else, reaching down to something that you didn't necessarily know you were capable of, or might not have even gotten there, but were still able to go through that process, so to speak.
I think, relate this to my school career now. Freshman year, honors English, I had Mr. Coyle, and I was an okay writer. I thought it was pretty good. First essay, ripped me to shreds, destroyed. That did hurt, but it's okay. And I realized after seeing all the hundreds of comments on that essay that there was more I could do. I shouldn't just take writing, at just a service level I had been taking it beforehand. And afterwards, I put more oomph into my essays, more details, better grammar, different things like that. And it doesn't just stop at my English essays, but it goes to all my classes, my service projects, being with my friends. I add more than I need to add because that's what you need to do to foster good relationships, good school life, social life, things like that.
I have a guy I didn't really talk to after we graduated from the prep. We sat next to each other in Greek. And then when I was in Chicago a couple years ago, he kind of looked me up and we reconnected. And he actually just called me last week. And he said, Jake, I don't know what to do with my career. I went to law school, I have these options, here's what I'm thinking about to do. And for us, the depth of friendship meant that we could immediately get to, where are the deepest desires of your heart? Where's God calling you in this? We went back to things like, remember when we talked about Francis Xavier? I feel called in this way like Xavier. I feel called in this way like Ignatius. What is the good spirit and the evil spirit here? And because he has that depth of spirituality that we got here, he and I went right into it and had this wonderful conversation after not having talked for a long time. And to me, that is the heart of that kind of prep friendship, that there's always going to be that depth.
That's great.
Yeah, I know for me, medicine was not my first career. It's what I always wanted to do. I ended up studying business because labs interfered with football practice in undergrad. So I didn't start medical school till I was 30 years old. The path that led me there, I did a post-baccalaureate program, and I had a year where I was applying to school, and I ended up filling in here as a science teacher. Father Sketches was out for a semester, and I happened to go to a football game, and Father Clifford and I were talking, and he said, well, what are you up to? And I said, well, I could use a job if you know any math or science teachers, and he's asked if I could start Monday. And I came in, met with Barb Brown, she gave me a big hug, and I started the next week. But my point to that is, while I was here, I had people looking out for me, people who were helping me. Father McShane from Fordham was on the board of trustees at the time. He came down, I spoke with him, and while I was applying to medical schools, he put me in touch with different people at some of the Jesuit medical schools. He put me in touch with a woman at Scranton who was an advisor for their pre-med students and did a very good job of matriculating students to med school. And what I took from that is, here are people that have, no obligation of helping me, going out of their way to help me because, I went to this school. The way that translates now, when I have the opportunity to help somebody, I try to do it. In my job, I usually don't have a very long period of time that I can sit and meet with patients, but I sit down, I take the time to listen, and there are times where I come across patients who, once they leave that emergency department, they're out on their own, and they get scared and they don't know how to navigate the health system. And they can't schedule a follow-up appointment with me, but there's times where I'll give them my personal cell phone number on my business card and say, if you need anything, call me. Mm-hmm. And they appreciate that, and I have had patients call me, and I've been able to help them. And that helps me a lot too, knowing that this is somebody who, in that short period of time, we made a human connection. And again, this is all stuff that I learned how to do at this institution.
Speaking of the identity of the prep, what does it mean to you that the preps, you guys know, the prep had an opportunity following the fire to move. Yeah. So what does it mean to you that the prep is still in North Philly? And what does it mean to Philly that the prep's still here?
I think it represents one of the great commitments that it's not comfortable calling the Jesuits a organization or an institution, but it just speaks volumes, because as I understand it, there was a lot of conversation about that, and maybe even some controversy along with it. But it seems that the decision, once made, was pretty swift and direct. And I think it made one of the most important statements that any institution could make, especially at that time. 1968, at 17th and Girard, we're going to rebuild and build and build and build some more. So it's about commitment. And I think for them at the time to make that commitment and to then educate all of us who are here as the beneficiaries of that commitment, we have a commitment and an obligation as well. And that's just the way I think about it. Even if I'm not coming here, if I'm over this way, I come down Ridge Avenue or I go on Girard Avenue, and I literally just turn and smile and keep on going.
When we were here, it was just men for others, right?
Yeah.
That was, and I remember when they changed it, I was coaching, and I didn't love the idea of men for and with others because it didn't look as cool on a button, right? But it didn't just roll off the tongue, right? Yeah. But over years of wisdom, hopefully, use that term loosely, but I think that's the element, right? It's you need to also be amongst people to be able to both help people and prove to them what your worth is as well, right? You can't, if we had removed ourselves from that, we would be, not to name the other schools, but we would be another, one of the same, Interact styled high schools that are removed from the element. It increases the oh, that's them type of persona, right? When we're here, it gives you, I hate to use the term street cred, but it does, right? We're here, we're in the element, we're amongst the people, and it's important, right? It's equally as important as doing nice tasks for people. It's just being with them sometimes. Sometimes that's the only thing you can do, is just be with them, right? And here we are.
Yeah. I think it's also, for me, the prep staying here after the fire, not, fleeing to the suburbs or the main line or wherever. It's the ultimate example of not forgetting where you came from, and sticking with your roots.
Yeah. I mean, as you know, St. Ignatius was a city guy. And a conversation that we have a lot internally in the society.
Did you hang out with him?
Yeah, he did.
A little older than I look, but doing okay.
And internally in the society, we have a lot of conversations about where should we be over the next 50 years. And I'm just realizing this now. In all those conversations, I say, we got to be in the heart of it. We got to be in the city. And I think it's because I saw what happened when I came into the city every day. I would have had a much easier commute if the prep had moved somewhere else. Being among people in their element teaches you something about how the world is and about how God is at work in the world. And that's why St. Ignatius wanted everybody to be there, and that's why I want us to be there.
And the kids here, we're not just stuck in the building either. We go out service projects. People take the LN, the Broad Street line. People go to the corner store after school all the time. I do. And so you're not just in North Philly and you say, oh, the school's in North Philly. I'm in North Philly. I'm amongst the people. No, you actually use the services in the area, you talk to the people in the area, you see someone on the sidewalk, you say hi to them, you get to know them maybe, who knows. And there's just so much more than just being in North Philly. You actually interact with the environment of North Philly, West Philly, all of Philly really, because we come from all around it.
That's a great point, Anton. Actually, I've often said in my high school experience, which was in New York, but I was fortunate enough to have a similar setting. It's kind of where I met the world, right? Makes no difference how big a city you're in. If you're a neighborhood guy, you're a neighborhood guy, right? And talk to me a little bit about how your eyes got opened based upon just who walked in the building every day, so to speak.
For me, like I said, I've come from a blue-collar neighborhood and two blue-collar parents. Getting to meet and interact and interface, and then getting the Kairos experience with other men from all walks of life, it just gave you the sense that your voice matters in every room, right? Like, people not only want to hear what you're saying, they really want to appreciate your perspective, whether they're from the main line, South Jersey, or Fishtown, where I came from. There's still this provided an interconnectivity that said, you matter, I want to know where you come from and what you're about. And it was just a perfect thing for myself and my brothers in the 90s to know that. And we carry that with us today, right? It doesn't matter what kind of room we're in, we feel like we matter, and it's a pretty cool element to bring with you.
Great.
Yeah, I'm from the main line, and my best friend from the prep is a South Philly guy. Still talk to him every day, and it's totally different worlds. And at a different school, I might have only met other guys from the main line, but here I met him and a bunch of other people, and you become a part of their families. And so you have families all over the city. I have families I can go to in Jersey. I have families in South Philly. I have other families on the main line that I can go to that are a part of my life that I just simply would not have had if I went somewhere else.
Those worlds intersect in such a great way here that in a city that is parochial in the best way, is neighborhoods in the old school way, to have it all come here, really, it gives you a great insight into how the world works. It gets you out of your own space and creates the room for you to grow in a lot of ways. Just a couple more questions. So, the Ignatian values, the grad, right? And that is, depending when you came to Jesuit education, a relatively newer idea, but the idea is it articulates the values of a graduate at graduation of a Jesuit student, what a Jesuit student would look like, right? And that's the idea of being academically ambitious, being loving, being religious, being open to growth and committed to doing justice and to serving. Obviously, those have played out in your careers. How aware were you that those were being instilled in you, and more importantly, where you are now, kind of put you on the spot? Which of those would you point to which of those values would you point to in your formation? Whether it be, again, I'll prompt you again, academically ambitious, open to growth, religious, loving, committed to justice, doing justice and serving. Where would you say that you found yourself growing into the most of that? It's a little bit of a setup for the guy in the collar, the religious piece.
I was going to give somebody else another.
Certainly the justice. We say it for different reasons now, but if you see something, say something. If you see some injustice, if you know someone is not being treated fairly, if you understand that a life circumstance doesn't necessarily have to be that way, then I am just, I don't know how it happened, but I am compelled to do something, or to take action, or to say something. The consequences will be whatever they're going to be, but I would not be true to what I was taught here, and all the people who poured so much into me, if I just kind of let it slide, or kind of act like I didn't hear it, or it didn't really happen, or something like that.
No, I'd say I knew from the moment I came to Prep U that they were trying to instill these values into us, because Cura Personalis was Coach Cockenberg. I guess this was when I was actually a leader for Prep U, but he pulled up a slideshow with all the grad principles. And wasn't very subtle. It was right in our faces, but that's how you do it. That's how they do it. And whether or not I realize it or not, throughout my day, I'm displaying one or multiple of these values, whether it be in my academics, being loving, open to growth, being committed to justice. And I may not realize I'm doing it, but I will always be doing it no matter what I do. So I think once it starts, it will continue for the rest of your life.
I would say two things. For me, in terms of the academic achievement and being intellectually competent, I was very lucky, and now that I'm a middle school teacher, I'm very aware of this. The fact that the prep program is so rigorous. I was really good at math when I was in 8th grade, and so I was immediately placed into a very high math class when I came here, and it was really hard, and it was really conceptual. And I see that, especially being a middle school teacher, that's not available to everybody. And so the fact that I could start really early in a very roundabout way is how I became a middle school teacher. Because I got to Fordham and they said, oh, you've done so much math. You're going to be a math tutor. And being a math tutor, they saw it on my resume and the Jesuit said, we're going to send you to be a middle school teacher because we know you can teach math because you did it at Fordham. And I wouldn't have had that sort of thing on my resume if it hadn't been for the academic rigor that I had here. That the Jesuits knew that they could kind of send me, if it's math, if it's Latin, if it's Greek, it's because I learned it here. We sometimes joke in the New York province of the Society of Jesus, you used to not be able to get accepted as an 18-year-old unless you had Latin and Greek. And so people sometimes say, well, the standards are so low now that you don't need to have Latin and Greek. And I say, I would still get in. I went to St. Joe's Prep, I would still get in. The other one for me is being religious. And I think that the thing that the prep instilled in me about being religious was that religion is not something separate from the rest of your life. Religion is the basis for everything that you do. And the way for me that was most instilled was what we did at Cape and Sword. Cape and Sword was always about how the shows that we were doing, the relationships that we had with each other and with the audience were prayerful. This was a way that we prayed, was by doing these stories and telling these stories really well, whether they were funny stories or sad stories. Obviously, one that was especially obvious was when we did Fiddler on the Roof. This is a story in which prayer is the center of it. But for us, being on stage and having the relationship with each other and with the audience was a prayer, it was a way we worshiped God. And so coming out of the prep, it was easy for me to find a way to be a religious adult because it wasn't just tied up in what I'd done in grade school, saying the old prayers. That stuff is good, but it's not it. And at the prep, we were challenged to be religious in that way from day one.
I mean, obviously none of our stories begin here. I was raised by a nurse, so I got to see that commitment to people leads to fulfillment. And then I got here, you're not sure what you want to do with yourself. My mother told me to never be a nurse, right? So I knew that was off the table. But then you get to see that regardless of what people are doing with their lives, the thing that makes them most happy is servitude to people, right? So it was just reinforced here for me. You know what I mean? I had that seed planted by my parents, and then it was reinforced here. So that I really learned to trust that as an adult that was finding my way, that business world it just wasn't going to make me completely happy and fulfilled. I needed some component that was involved in other people's lives.
To kind of piggyback on what Mike just said, I couldn't agree more. I've realized here that, I want to do something that I get something out of it. I want a sense of fulfillment. I couldn't imagine doing something for my entire life where I didn't feel fulfilled. And that was something that I learned here. The prep talked about educating the mind, body, and spirit, and educating the whole person. And, fulfillment and feeling a sense of self-worth was really important for me. And that was something that I learned when I came here.
Mike, I'm going to put you on the spot, then we're going to go to the lightning round. You talked a little bit before about the idea that some people said, hey, you went to the prep and you became a fireman. But you said, no, I became a fireman because I went to the prep.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Because I'm on the spot, my mother also raised me to be very as humble as humanly possible. So it's an odd thing to really speak as opening, right? Yeah. But I felt like the Lord gave me a set of skills, right? I had a physical capability, a mental component, and an emotional ability to handle it all. And post 9/11, I had conversations with my father about joining the military. He begged me not to, and then this opened up, and it was like I can be the person that they call in their most desperate hour, and I feel like I can do that because I feel like God made me to be able to do it. So that was kind of all she wrote for my career.
Well, I just am always struck by really what sets the Jesuits apart as an order is the idea of being contemplatives in action, right? And so I think you're each, and you too, Anton, as somebody who's acting here, Antoine, is that we are, you're acting what you've learned, right? You're acting on it, right? It's St. Ignatius said, love is shown as deeds as much as words. And you guys take action in your jobs. The way you've chosen to act in life is acting out those very values, which is amazing and a testament to the people you are and the formation that you experience here. And it's not mutually exclusive, right? I mean, well, and it's not mutually exclusive, right? Because we look to help find those young men who have that, right? We can't make somebody they're not. All we could do is help somebody become the better version of themselves and keep working towards that modus, that real modus, that growth. I want to thank the alumni and our student who joined us today and really are a great representative of what the prep is all about. You clearly have an idea of how they are committed to the prep, but just as importantly, how the prep helped them become the men they are. Representative of thousands of prep alums out there who are living their lives in the same way, and this is really what we're all about. It's the outcome of a prep education. You're here for 4 years, but you live the mission for life. So thank you for joining us. Thank them for being part of us here, and go prep.